When the stories you're telling about yourself are not working for you, are hurting you, making you sad or frustrated, or just not giving you the outcomes that you want, it's time for a different way. Let's tap into the power of sacred story.
Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive, spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a pathway to remembering your divinity. I am Michelle Bursell. As a psychotherapist and priestess, my work is to bridge both the emotional and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever.
Hello, beautiful souls. I am so excited to be with you today talking about the power of story, because it always fascinates me when I hear some doozies of a story that people are telling themselves. And we don't realize it, but we become those stories that we tell ourselves. And I'm fortunate to be a person who has this very sacred work where I get to hear the stories that are within people that they don't tell anyone else. And I know how hurtful, inaccurate, and painful that they are in the lives of others. And so today I want to discuss how you can start to shift from these disempowered stories to empowered stories, some elements, some pieces, some tools that I use that have supported me, and how easy it is to find ourselves caught in a story that disconnects us from our truth and power, and how we can liberate ourselves from old stories. So what I think the most common thing is that we are going about our day-to-day lives, and our day-to-day lives have challenges, right? There's a problem at work or with your relationship, with your kid, with your finances, your happiness, whatever it is. And in those challenges, you forget how powerful you are. And when you forget how powerful you are, you start to create a story that says the opposite of why you're not powerful, of why things aren't working out for you, because your mind can attach with the ego to try to protect you. And it doesn't feel like protection because the stories can be painful, but we want to make sense of things, even if it hurts us. And so we create these stories that puts ourselves down from remembering our truth, our power, our love, our expansiveness. And so we tell ourselves stories, and this is what I hear stories about, this is just the hand I've been dealt, and there's nothing I can do about it. Like, this is my life. Thanks. Everyone else over there has the beautiful life that I'm seeing on social media, but this is mine. This is the hand I'm dealt with. Okay. And they just take it as that's what they've been given. What I've heard recently on social media, I'm just old and tired. And I really think this person was my age or younger. So that kind of made me laugh, because we've all seen people who are in their 80s. I was just on vacation in the Galapagos, and there were people in their 80s thriving. And it is a gift. Maybe they were blessed, they didn't have any, health issues, but you can thrive, and you can certainly thrive mentally and emotionally at any age. And I'm telling you, these people were not telling themselves, I'm just old and tired, right? And that's a story. It's a story that becomes a defense mechanism that says, I'm not going to try anymore. I mean, really, that's what we're saying, right? Especially if someone's my age, younger, saying that, it's a defense mechanism. Or the story that I used to tell myself is, I've done everything I can. Nothing works for me. That's a story that, for me, was kind of like, you know, I did put in effort, but it didn't work out for me. And so I'm giving up. I'm giving up on myself. And I have reason to give up on myself because when I try, things don't work out for me. So I've really had to be watchful of this victim story that I would find myself in, because there was this expectation that just because I tried and just because I had good intentions, that things were supposed to work out for me. And that's not always how our human journey is. And oftentimes our human journey is um, a series of challenges after challenges. Why? Because my strong, spiritual, sensitive ones, you are the hero of your story. And you become the hero of your story through making it through the challenges you've made it through. And so, you listening in, because so much of my work is about your sensitivity, about your emotions, you know how big of a role that your emotions can play in the stories that we tell ourselves. And so because the emotion makes the story we tell ourselves, it turns it into a belief. And if we believe these stories about ourselves, watch out, because then they become more and more our reality. You tell yourself you're old and tired, you're going to act old and tired. Sorry, but you're reiterating that and dialing into that. And personally, that is not a story I want to tell myself even when I'm 90. So we get to choose, but your emotions are going to be there. They're going to be supporting you to see when you're in a story that is not of your truth, because you're going to feel sad, depleted, disconnected, numb, because exits aren't serving you. And that's the good news. So we want to get into 3 ways, 3 tools to support you with changing these stories. And really to make sure your story isn't a cop out. And I say that with love, because I had my cop out story, right? Like, I tried, nothing works for me. And that's the lie of our ego. That's our ego saying, play it safe over here where you don't try anymore. And you don't have to worry about your heart being wounded. But your heart is strong. I mean, yes, we've got to lick our wounds sometimes. Listen, we've all had our pity parties. I teach this work on empowered emotions, and I've had disempowered emotions, right? We all go through the disempowered states. And then we have a choice to say, am I going to stay there, or am I going to move myself by choice to an empowered state? We don't want to push it. We don't want to force ourselves. We've got to, again, lick our wounds. But at some point, we've got to say, I'm tired of licking and I want to do something different here. So, and honestly, it becomes tiring to defend these old stories that disempower us, because what happens is that your mind will then start to look for proof as to why those stories are accurate. And now you're reinforcing the wrong thing. Like, oh, I woke up and my back was stiff, or it was, my hip felt weird, or my knee locked up, or whatever. Like, you can find this evidence to prove your disempowered story. And when we do that, we're reinforcing an outcome that we don't want. So why would we do that? So much that of your ego wants to defend the lies, because the ego wants you to believe the lies are real and that your truth is the fallacy. The truth that you can be alive and vibrant and expansive throughout your life. Your ego is afraid of that because the heart can get hurt along the way, because you'll face perhaps some disappointments along the way. But those disappointments are different because you're continuing to move towards expansive to the possibilities rather than the disappointment of just living a shut down life where you tell yourself you're old and tired. So if you're telling yourself stories that contract, you will lead a life where you are just going through the motions of life. And I know you will not be happy. And I know because you're a listener of this podcast, that is not you. But if you know someone or that's them, you can perhaps give them, drop this episode with the link to them, and maybe they'll open themselves to the possibility of shifting their story as well. So it's fogginess. We all go through periods of fogginess where we forget our truth. And then we tell ourselves stories as to why we're forgetting and why the truth that we know in our heart of hearts isn't real. And when we buy into those stories, we fall into the darkness. And this is part of our normal journey so that we remember the truth of who we are. And it's a human condition that so many people go through. And I think we tell ourselves the story that we just keep pushing forward and we'll get there. But sometimes that pushing is coming from stories of lack, not enoughness, shame, that if we don't address those aspects to the story of who we deep down think that we are or fear that we are, we may have success in certain areas of our life, and other areas that part of the story will show up. And so we're given these opportunities of darkness to start to slow down and dissect the story, and the aspects of the story that aren't working for you. And oftentimes what I see when we have someone, especially that's been successful, and then they get pulled into this darkness of depression, emptiness, numbness. It's exactly because that story that may have pushed them to succeed, not enough, and I'm going to prove myself, has limited them in other ways, has limited their happiness for sure, perhaps limited their relationships. And so the universe, the divine, wants you to experience the love and expansion in all areas of life. And so it's going to take you into the darkness to slow your butt down so you stop reacting from an old story that doesn't fully serve you. The universe wants you to have the fullness of life experience. That is the love of the universe for you. And so these challenges are there to help you dissect the elements of the story that don't work so you can resurrect with a stronger story of the truth of who you are, knowing in your heart of hearts your resilience, your love, your power, especially you, my emotionally sensitive people. And so we are going to be talking about remembering and you fighting back for your truth in the stories that you tell yourself rather than buying into the ego lies and having that be your life story, because that would be the biggest tragedy. And the love of the divine wants you to remember all of your expansiveness, all of the possibilities that come from your unique expression of self and life, and what that brings into the world is more life, more expansiveness, more love when you remember. And so this is the power of sacred story. And this is a part of your journey, if you're listening to this, that you're ready to start to step into, play with, experiment with the power of sacred story, and to remember fully your truth, regardless what is happening around you. And remember the love and the power that you are. That is how powerful your sacred story becomes. Because despite the external, you can remember your truth of who you are. So the truth is that we've been fed beliefs throughout our lives, depicting ourselves as limited or powerless. And maybe these stories have been passed on to you. Maybe someone decades ago told you a story about yourself that has limited you. And now is your time to reclaim your truth. And so let's begin. I'm going to share with you 3 ways, 3 tools to start to work with sacred story and to reclaim your truth. And the one that I'm most passionate about is the stories that we tell ourselves when emotions arise. Because when emotions arise, especially negative feelings, we've been taught a disempowered story about these negative feelings. And so we buy into the ego's version of this story. I feel sadness, I'm empty and alone. I feel anxiety, I feel out of control. I feel angry, I feel, powerless and disrespected. And that is simply the ego's version. And you can absolutely build a skill to tell a different story. Emotion is energy. It's this internal energy that can move mountains because emotion is what anchors in belief. We can have a thought, but when that thought is believed with an emotion, that's what with us. And again, whatever that belief is can move mountains or can keep you stuck because whatever that story is that you're saying about yourself is either tapping into your truth and power and knowingness, or it's belittling you, diminishing you, disrespecting the divinity that you're born to be. And so your emotions are there to signal to you when you are out of alignment with your truth. And each specific emotion is there to give you specific guidance and how to realign. And when you tell yourself that story, and you tell yourself the story of, I know the language of my negative feelings. I know that they're here from love. I know that they're guiding me to know what exactly to do to get back on track. You feel empowered when negative emotions arise. You're like, oh, I feel sad and that makes sense. I feel anxious and that makes sense. I feel frustrated and that makes sense because I understand exactly why this signal is arising and what it's telling me to do different. Because there's a reason why, if in a scenario, one person feels guilty and another person feels anger, there's different guidance that they're supposed to be taking to show up in a more empowered state. And so, is the story that you tell yourself is that I'm sad, and so I'm, just going to be stuck in the sadness. I'm going to be depressed, or the sadness is trying to tell me that the way that I'm operating through life, the way that I'm thinking or viewing or perceiving, or the stories that I'm telling myself are not working for me, and there's an opportunity here to change it. It's not to say that your sadness is your fault, that your depression is your fault. It's to say that in that there's still an opportunity. I promise you there is. I've worked with too many people where they have been told that they will be depressed their whole life. And once they understood the empowered language of their negative feelings, they weren't anymore. So you tell me, is it a fluke, or is there power to story? The story we tell ourselves about our experiences, and especially the experiences with their emotions, because this is what has changed my life, is creating a new story when it came to emotions that I needed for myself because I'm emotionally sensitive. And I kept getting taken down with the old understanding, the old perspective that was taught to me with clinical psychology. And I needed a new way. I needed an empowered way. And so this empowered language was a choice of taking this energy, and is it going to take me down or is it going to build me up? And the way that it has built me up has happened to build other people up around the world, and it can do the same for you. Power of sacred story when it comes to your emotions. And trust me, I got it wrong for a very long time. When I didn't know that the emotions were signals, the signals got louder, they got stronger, because I wasn't listening to the divine guidance. I wasn't listening to my inner guidance. And so, like any signal, it's meant to get louder to get your attention. So you do something different instead of doing the same things over and over again, right? So this is the opportunity that you can change your emotional story. What is your story going to be with your relationship with your emotions, especially as someone sensitive? Is it that this is a fault, that I was made weak, or wow, what a gift I have, what a sensitivity, um, it, what sensitivity is such a gift for you because it helps you realign back to your truth even more quickly so that you can be the hero of your story to the love and potential that is within your heart, that it becomes your reality. So stories that you tell yourself, being able to see the power within you or to diminish it. And so this is what I mean when you want your story about you to be about you being the hero of your life. Because, especially because you're here on this podcast, means you're a type of person who's looking to live your most expansive life. I mean, the people that are telling themselves no, and no judgment towards them. Really, I know it sounds like I'm being judging, but when you tell yourself, I'm too old and tired," right? Like you're not going to be listening to this podcast. And hey, they've got something going on in their life where that is a story that is uh, is where they're at right now, because maybe there's other areas of their life that they're focusing on. Fine, right? But you're here, you're not willing to tell yourself that you don't want to live that way. You already are a hero because you're breaking out of the pack, because the pack wants to say things like that that disempowers us, and you're saying no. I want I want the potentials and possibilities for myself. And so you already are the hero. You're already willing to do something different. You're willing to create a new narrative around negative emotions. You're willing to create a new narrative that doesn't disrespect or dishonor the innate power within you. And so that is you being the hero. It's not that um, that everything in your life is perfect. It's you knowing that you are on your way because you're willing to do what others may not be willing to do to live in this expansive state. You are the hero. You, especially as a sensitive, spiritual person, you're strong. Your sensitivity, what you've had to face, you are so powerful to be able to learn how to navigate that and to be willing to continue to learn how to navigate that in more expansive ways. You're already the hero. Build your hero story, see the things that you've overcome, and put your stake in the frickin' ground, knowing that you are resilient and you are going to find your way through any challenge, and you will. You got to stay open and continue to learn, and you will. And then the last piece that I like to use is that I use stories of others who have values or meaningfulness to me, and I embrace and take in their energy as a part of me. So, for instance, I take on the energy of Mother Mary, that she is a love that creates miracles. And I utilize her as a form of reference to know that our energy, if I'm thinking of her, our energy is connected. If I have value towards that energy is connected. So I am an expression of Mary, of Mother Mary, of being the love that is compassionate, that can create miracles. And so I embody that. So I love using spiritual frameworks for that. It can be any spiritual component that you honor. And that can be embodied and remembered within you. Because anyone that you look up to, that you honor that you see, you're able to see them because you have that quality as well. And you can embody that by remembering that what is seen and felt from another is flowing through you as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it. Otherwise, you wouldn't recognize it. So you can use, you know, people, or I prefer spiritual uh, people, and expressions of the divine, to utilize their energy, their guidance, and their love to work through me, as the spiritual can work through you as you. So I hope this supports you in beginning to develop sacred story. I also want you to be aware that I recently had a free workshop, and it's called the Chakra Reboot. And this is all about helping you understand where energy is stuck. And what's important about that is that there's usually a story tied to where your energy is stuck. Because this is when people say, like, hey, I already, worked on that. I went to therapy. I, did this energy class, or what, I'm meditating, and I already worked through that. Well, you may have, but then the story, and the emotion tied to it isn't fully processed. My Chakra Reboot is going to help you identify what some of the elements of those stories are, what the beliefs are that may be holding you back, that may be keeping you stuck. Now, I just did this. So you got to sign up and watch the replay, because this is going to go away very soon. So please utilize this free workshop to support you to create sacred story. It also give you an opportunity how you can begin to start to change your relationship with your emotions from this empowered state, if that's something that interests you. All right, my loves, I'm so grateful, so incredibly grateful that our lives, our journeys have intertwined, that you are on this path of expansion and possibilities. And I just hope that you always know deep within your heart that there's nothing to prove or fix, just to remember. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
I am so honored you have joined me today. If you enjoyed the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, subscribe so you don't miss any of our power-filled episodes. Also, if you know another who is strong, sensitive, and spiritual, and wants to dive deeper into emotions and ancient wisdom so they too can create profound peace and fulfillment from within, please share this podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to reconnecting with you soon.